International Women's Day's roundtable discussion hosted by Corteva and by Agbiz, the Gordon Institute of Business Science with the University of Pretoria. This morning, we are extremely honored to be hosting a roundtable on building an enabling environment for women entrepreneurs in agriculture, particularly from the policy and practice perspectives. So we have 4 guests who are in the online and 1 guest who's in the room. But before we introduce them, I'd like to welcome Ms. Miranda Hoskins, who is the... Sorry, Miranda, I've lost you on my program. You'll have to introduce yourself. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. It is my absolute pleasure to be opening this event and to welcome all of you from all over. We have a significant number of participants online. We have some, of course, in our new way of working, we have some people in the room at the auditorium in Agbiz. And then we have a wide variety of speakers and panelists. So it is my pleasure to welcome all of you. So let me kick it off officially. I'm Miranda Hoskins, the Executive Director for Social Education here at Agbiz. Within that portfolio, the Entrepreneurship Development Academy sits very squarely within social education. And so it was within that role that we partnered with Corteva Agriscience to present this, which is really the first of a series of quarterly roundtables on women in agriculture. So when we started talking to Corteva, it was really about the fact that agriculture remains a key sector for the economy, that there's a lot of hope and belief placed on the agriculture sector to be able to stimulate job creation, to contribute significantly to economic development. And of course, because of that responsibility, what we were talking about was the need to start looking at women's participation in the roles of entrepreneurs in agriculture, because ultimately it would be entrepreneurs that would be stimulating job creation, and ultimately entrepreneurs that bear a burden and a responsibility. But if I talk to entrepreneurs, then they see it as a joy to be able to contribute to economic development and to be able to generate jobs. And so this roundtable is really about looking at how we engage with all of the significant stakeholders in the agricultural space. How do we start to convene meaningful conversations around how those stakeholders participate in agriculture, and how we start to give voice to women entrepreneurs, and what kind of support mechanisms we can bring and put into place to support women as they pursue business in agriculture, but also to support them as they are starting out and growing enterprises that we all believe and hope would ultimately contribute to the economy in significant ways. And so it is my pleasure to welcome all of you, particularly to mention that we have the Honourable Minister Thoko Didiza, who will provide the keynote address, and she holds the portfolio for agriculture, land reform, and rural development. In addition, we have quite a good contingent from Corteva Agriscience, including Subara Colley, who is the President for Africa and Middle East, Tony Esmeralda, who is the country leader for South Africa, Betty Kiplagat, who holds the government affairs portfolio. And in addition, we are delighted to welcome Mbali Nwoki, who is the CEO of Green Terrace and a columnist for Farmers Weekly magazine, Wandile Sihlobo, who is the chief economist of the Agricultural Business Chamber of South Africa, and Julie Makena, who is an entrepreneur and owner of Mutembe Millers. In addition to that, I'd like to welcome our host for this morning, so Dr. Michelle Reiters, who is a member of faculty here at Agbiz. Michelle's specialization is in development finance. And so without further ado, I think it makes sense for us to kick things off and for me to hand over to Michelle. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Miranda. Thank you. Just a housekeeping note, we are observing social distancing in the room. we are masked, and we have a very small group in the room, so there's enough space for us to be safe. We also have social distance on the podium, so we are trying to be as compliant as possible in these really strange times that we live in right now. So as an introduction, Corteva's video is lined up, their promotional video, and we'd like to go into that right now.
Corteva is in it for farmers, for good. As a company solely focused on agriculture, we understand the impact of climatic and soil diversity, the unique requirements of each region, each farmer, each crop, and the need for sustainability. To this, we apply our global mind, with 5,000 researchers in more than 130 countries, ensuring farmers of advanced seed technology and guarding growing investments through innovative crop protection. Local investment includes research facilities on par with the best in the world and the largest private insectary in Africa. Advanced genetic breeding is combined with intense trials, testing and refinement in different bioclimatic zones to bring forth the best in-class products. Beyond in-seed value, our on-seed applied technology, on-farm crop protection, digital and agronomic solutions are all designed to optimize farmers' productivity, profitability and sustainability. Because by being wholly devoted to agriculture, we have a deeper understanding of farming, the needs of our farmers, and the country's need for farmers. This is what drives our researchers to find new avenues for sustainable growth. It is the reason for having state-of-the-art seed production technology on home ground. Our motivation for creating effective, locally proven solutions to protect land and crops with care for the future. This is the world of Corteva in South Africa. Growing progress, enriching lives, now and for generations to come. Corteva, keep growing.
We now invite opening remarks from Mr. Subara Colley, who is the Regional President of Corteva Agriscience, Africa and Middle East. Subara, thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Michelle. Can you hear me okay? Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the following guests: Honorable Minister Thoko Didiza, fellow panelists of farmers present and following the event online, members of the media, Corteva Agriscience representatives present. Firstly, happy International Women's Day to all. Today is an opportunity to reflect on the vital role women play in agriculture and to honor women and their achievements. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all to the first roundtable discussion on building an enabling environment for women entrepreneurs in agriculture. My name is Subara, and I am the president at Corteva Agriscience, Africa, Middle East. This includes managing the seed brands, Pioneer and Pannar, crop protection, and digital businesses across the African continent. Corteva Agriscience is a publicly traded global pure play agriculture company that provides farmers around the world with the most complete portfolio in the industry, including some of the most recognized brands in agriculture globally, Pioneer and Pannar brands, and an industry-leading crop protection products. In Africa, Middle East, we operate our regional office out of Pretoria, South Africa, with business centers in Cairo, Nairobi, and Casablanca. Today, I am excited and humbled to be part of this event, an event that helps us fulfill our purpose as a company. At Corteva, our purpose is to enrich the lives of the farmers and consumers for generations to come. This also includes enriching the lives of women in agriculture. As we have built Corteva, it has been part of our values to focus on women and youth. We are committed to engaging with supporting women in agriculture across the globe, from the largest farms in the most advanced economies to the smallest subsistence farms in the developing world. Around the world, women play a very critical role in agriculture, representing an estimated 43% of the world's food production and more than 25% of its farming population. Women are very critical, not just for the success of our company, but to feeding the world. As such, Corteva ensures that women across the world have the tools they need to be successful. You will agree with me that women in agriculture not only have the ability to produce and make money, but also uplift their communities, ensuring that families have access to education and what they need to be successful. Corteva as a company, we conducted a study in 2018 that looked at the barriers to women farmers in 17 countries. Following is the outcome of the study. We identified 3 big factors. Number 1 is lack of access to financing. And number 2, challenges to own land. And number 3, lack of training to play leadership roles. This data from the survey has allowed us to look at what Corteva can do to support women. Today, I'm very happy to say that the insights from this study have led to the company implementing many initiatives to support women. Corteva launched partnerships to deliver solutions supporting women farmers in the US, Brazil, Asia, Kenya, South Africa, and Europe. Corteva has launched partnerships with key institutions to deliver solutions that enable women in agriculture, because we know that this cannot be done without partnerships. Today, as you join at this event, I am glad to inform you that Corteva is implementing the Women Agripreneur program in 2021 in South Africa. 35 women have been identified to participate in this program. We look forward to walking this journey with them. As we do this work, we remain humble and inspired. It's a commitment, and the results do not come overnight. It's a long-term commitment for all to really be able to turn the tide to bring some women into leadership roles in ag. Thank you all for joining us today. I hope you will be enriched by the conversations. Over to you, Michelle, and thank you.
Thank you, Subara. Some important things that you're mentioning there: women's role in agriculture. And we know agriculture is a major sector across the continent. So I'd like to commend Corteva on starting this initiative to create gender parity in the agriculture sector across the continent. And it's a very auspicious day that we can do it on International Women's Day. So thank you very much. I now have the pleasure of recognizing the Honorable Minister Thoko Didiza. She is Minister of Agriculture and Land Reform in South Africa. Minister, we welcome you humbly, and we look forward to listening to your keynote address.
Thank you very much, Program Director, Corteva Agriscience South Africa leadership that are present here, Gordon Institute of Business Science Management, women in agriculture, agribusiness, and broader food sector participants who are here, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Today we celebrate Women's Day, International Women's Day, whose theme is Women in Leadership, Achieving an Equal Future in a COVID-19 World. Today's theme is instructive in that when we reflect the battle against COVID-19, we've seen women in the front line as nurses, as doctors, as pathologists, including researchers leading the fight, at times themselves succumbing to the pandemic. In families, women as wives and as domestic workers had to keep the families together, protect them, nurse them, and bury while they comfort the living. In the farms, women as farmers and farm workers had to work tirelessly to ensure food security for their families and their nations. In the public services, women had to ensure the wheels of state run, albeit the conditions that require agility in service delivery in the time of COVID. We therefore wish to say thank you to each one of those women who played their part during this fight, because through your efforts in the forefront of the fight, many lives were saved. COVID-19 will unfortunately continue to live among us, and therefore we need a conversation on policy and regulations which will build on our experiences as women. We need to assume our leadership role and chart ways that will assist our families and nations to cope. You as organizers, however, today during this International Women's Day, have challenged us to reflect on innovative solutions to maximize the potential of women and girls in agricultural development. I wish to propose a few issues that I think we can reflect on today on how we can build back better during and even post the pandemic. Access to land, as it has already been said, remains central for any producer, be they women or men. Diverse tenure systems that is legally sound, it's what we need to also look at rather than being monofocused and channeling people in one tenural system. Infrastructure both on and on farm remains critical to support women entrepreneurs in agriculture. Market information and market access, accessibility to financial services and access to affordable finance is one of the key instruments that, in my view, creates the bedrock around which any entrepreneur, particularly women, can thrive in agriculture. The other matter that I want to reflect on is technology and innovation in agricultural education. In my view, this must be key, not as an accident, but also we shouldn't look at technology and innovation in agricultural education as a facilitator because we're in the time of COVID where we must learn online. But we must see it as an instrument to assist our entrepreneurs to build back better during and after this condition. Access to good quality seeds and inputs that take into consideration climate realities, in my view, it's one of those innovative solutions that we must put in place. If one looks at our own country at this current moment, we've experienced heavy rains. Yes, the rains we need, but in some areas it was destructive. While we continue to have many provinces and regions that are battling with drought at the same time. What this means is climate change is no more an issue for discussion in the boardrooms or in conferences or in global, fora, but it is a daily occurrence that we must live with. But as agriculture, we need to continue to feed our nations. How do we enable our producers, particularly smallholder women producers, to cope with realities of climate change? And I suggest, and maybe as part of the webinar, this will be one of the discussion, that access to quality seeds as well as inputs is one of those interventions that are critical. Issues of agricultural logistics from farm to table of our consumers is another. how do we actually enable rural women to be able to move their goods into the marketplace? Investment in agricultural education, particularly our colleges, will need to be one of the focus areas, as we have heard also the Minister of Finance giving us some support in agricultural extension services. Today, the Minister of Education has also made an announcement that as one of the interventions from their side will be to support those struggling students with bursaries, particularly in agricultural colleges. And this is welcome because agricultural education is key as a solution for women and girl entrepreneurs in the agricultural sector. Building on indigenous knowledge system in order to broaden our food choices and strengthen resilience, in my view, it's important. There's a lot of indigenous vegetables that women have actually harvested, used for many years. Some of them will soon become extinct if they're not actually protected and ensure that we breed some of these varieties to actually extend the choices of our consumers. Lastly, in my view, the issues of inclusivity in the sector, particularly the gender dimension of our agricultural policies, legislation, and program is key if we are to support women in agriculture as successful entrepreneurs. I therefore would like to say, having raised these key points for discussion, wish all of you well in this webinar, and I'll be very interested to sit through and listen and reflect with you on the discussions going forward. And happy International Women's Day.
Thank you, Minister. Before we go into, you've disappeared. Your background was cutting out your face. So I was wondering if you could turn off your background.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Minister, you mentioned so many things that I'm sure have come up in the Corteva 2018 report as well. Access to land being one, tenure systems being another, the provision of infrastructure, especially to smallholder farmers, market access, access to finance, which is a big one, and then the role of technology and innovation in the development of value chains and farms within the agricultural sector. These are very important aspects that we need to discuss this morning. Again, a reminder that we're looking at the policy framework in the agricultural sector so that we can create an enabling framework for women farmers within this sector. And I'm so pleased that we actually have someone who is a woman farmer of sorts, Mbali Nwoki, who is here in the I wanted to say studio, in the auditorium with me this morning. Mbali Nwoki is CEO of Green Terrace Farm and a columnist for the Farmers Weekly magazine. I grew up with Farmers Weekly, and you don't look like one of the contributors. I'm so glad to say that. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Can you tell us a little bit about your business and where it started, what you're doing now?
Okay, so Green Terrace is an agribusiness. It's a farm. It's based in the east of Johannesburg, in an area called Babsfontein. And right now we are a hydroponic farm that is cultivating vegetable crops. We supply to wholesalers, retailers, as well as the fresh produce markets across the country.
Okay. How long has your business been in operation?
Since 2016.
Okay, so it's fairly new.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. So if you had which you do right now, you have the opportunity to speak to people like the minister who has policy imperatives, and Corteva, who could possibly influence the policy direction for agriculture. What would you like to see within the policy that would enable women farmers? That's a big question.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
So what do you need in your day-to-day running of your farm or your business that would make it easier?
Yeah, I think it's great that we mentioned things like land, technology, climate change, access to quality seeds, input supplies, etc. And I think the bulk of that really comes into the financing. What I definitely would like to see is some patient financing across all financial institutions. Right now, we have a bank, Land Bank, that is obviously liquidated and is experiencing extreme financial pressures. So a typical farmer like myself cannot approach the Land Bank. A typical farmer like myself would also, speaking from experience throughout the COVID pandemic, had 2 discussions with 2 major banks in the agribusiness divisions seeking additional finance to put certain infrastructure on my farm. And, one of them, the response was, our credit policy doesn't give out finance to entrepreneurs. The other one was, my business is too small right now from an agribusiness perspective to assist in terms of financing. And so where does that leave me, besides being a woman, but where does that leave me being an entrepreneur in the country when, government's drive is to push entrepreneurs like myself to push and create more jobs, to sustain our immediate economy. So I think for me, it's definitely coming up with different financial models, patient finance for entrepreneurs like myself, and being a woman specifically to grow our businesses.
So the policy needs to address the access to finance.
Absolutely, because I think it's critical. And as a farmer, we are entrepreneurs, we are business people. Agriculture, as much as it can boost the economy, it is a very competitive environment as well. So to remain competitive, to put infrastructure, to use technology, to stay abreast of the time, and grow or produce alongside climate change, you really need some form of investment that could be plowed into your farm for you to be able to, trade or compete in that level. I think finance is a critical component to it.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Mbali. Julie, I'd like to cross over to you right now. You are in Kenya. What are the experiences with women farmers and having access to decision makers within the East African context? Sorry, Julie Makena is the entrepreneur and owner of Mutembe Millers. Sorry, Julie.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
My name's Julie Makena from Kenya, Meru County. I'm based in a village called Charia in Mongambia Ward. I'm an entrepreneur in maize value chain, and I started as a farmer in 2008, where I did farming. Then afterwards, I saw it necessary for me to start a business in serious, so that I could help the women in the area. It's a very productive area because women in Meru, they produce around 70% of the maize that is produced in Kenya. So it's necessary for me to start a serious store where I could purchase the product from the women. Then afterwards, I started a small milling business. I started milling locally within the area for the women for their consumption in the homes. Afterwards, I put up a big plant, a big mill, where I process the flour I buy maize from the women, then I process it, I add value to it. Then right now I'm an entrepreneur and owner of Mutembe Millers. And then I sell the flour into packets. I do it in packets right now. Then I work with many women, even in my industry. There are a lot of women there. The women occupy around 60%. Yeah.
Thanks, Julie. So it sounds as if you've set up a cooperative around the milling process. And so what are some of the enabling factors that you would need to make sure that your business grows, or that women who feed their maize into your business continue to grow their businesses? Are there some policy issues that they would like to see government addressing?
The women would like to be assisted financially, and also a ready market for their products, because right now the climate is very favorable for the product. So I think if women were financed and then they were enlightened on the maize production, I think it would be better. So I would urge the government and even the private sector to come up with the tailor-made policies to support women activities in the area. They could also organize women in cottage industries to enable them gain full value of the product. Also, they could incorporate tailor-made entrepreneurship short courses for the women who we have already organized in small groups. We started with 40 women. Then they increased to 2,000 women, whom we have divided into 52 women groups. That brings to around 2,000 total the women farmers. And then the Corteva came in. They were trained on good seed quality, good agronomic practices, and then the post-harvesting handling. They have already been educated on that through the groups. So I think they could, the government could also increase awareness on support programs available in the society, in the sector, sorry. Yeah.
Thank you, Julie. Wandile Sihlobo, who is an agri-economist, Chief Economist of the Agricultural Business Chamber of South Africa. Welcome, Wandile. There's some important factors that have been raised by both Mbali and by Julie around the necessity for policy to support women agriculturalists. What are some of your thoughts on the policy frameworks that could be introduced from an economic perspective?
Good morning, Michelle, and good morning to Minister and the colleagues on the webinar. I mean, I'm listening to the Minister, listening to Mbali, listening to Julia, and I mean, there's a common thread there, Michelle, and you will agree on this, because the aspect of finance is coming up. And I think one of the important things and the key points that I'm picking up from Julia around the fact that in Kenya, women farmers have been able to organize themselves in a nice grouping, which have been able to aggregate their efforts. And I think that's something that in South Africa, it's worth considering from Mbali and some of her colleagues, but I'm sure that those are some of the things she's considering. From a policy perspective at which you are asking on, I think the minister didn't mention this, but I do think that South African government is already to a certain extent thinking about some of this work. If you look back, for example, from the Land Reform Panel report that was done for the president in 2018-19, one of the aspects that was suggested there, Michelle, was that there needs to be a beneficiary selection criteria when government thinks about land reform, when government thinks about support systems. And if you were to look at the criteria that was suggested there, it favors more on a women's side. It favors more on the young people. So in writing, that work is beginning to appear there. But obviously, in practice perspective, that is not yet transpired. But I do think that also in that report, one of the important things which to a certain extent aligns with the points that were raised by Mbali, was what is called in that report the Land Reform Fund, which was suggested there. And that Land Reform Fund was in one way supposed to address the land purchase issues, but also more on offering the patient capital that Mbali was speaking about, particularly to the entrepreneurs, the people that are at the entrance stages of the agricultural sector. And I think that if private sector as well as the government could look back in that report and see on those ideas about how can we take those policy insights into something that could actually be practical, but in formalizing all of that, not stick on those theoretical aspects that we identify in the report, but speak continuously with people like Mbali and the other colleagues that are on the ground and ensure that that response mechanism really speaks to the needs of the people. But I think the big issue, Michelle, as a closing point on this, is financing. And I think that we need to align it with that access to land. And I think over time, we could be able to address some of the aspects that I'm picking up from the colleagues that are in practice in agriculture. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Wandile, thanks. You've picked up on some important aspects. Subara, I would like to bring you in here to find out what Corteva is doing on some of these issues that have been raised by Mbali and Julia, and then the overall discussion of agriculture and the role that Corteva wants to play within the African market.
Thank you, Michelle. Firstly, we covered pretty broad areas in agriculture. Let me talk about some of my experiences outside of Africa also. These problems that we talked about or the improvements that we need in the policies and what we need to address are pretty generic, and they spread across, especially with dealing with the smallholder farmers. Let me start by saying a few things as to how we are addressing as an organization. As all of us know that Corteva largely deals with inputs primarily. The first thing is talking of the climate change. These are all the factors that are going to be in front of us very soon. As a company, we try to bring in the best of the technologies, invest into it, and make it useful for the farmers at a very local level. So that is one area as a company we definitely contribute. Having said that, it does not end there. We really need to form solid partnerships so that we can enable it as an integrated structure, in the sense, first of all, in addition to selling the seed as well as other inputs, we also provide very good agronomic knowledge to the farmers to improve their productivity and profitability as an organization, right? Let me take one example in Kenya, what we did with women farmers, wherein we have this group of farmers not only providing access to the inputs, but also enabling them to maximize their production is one intervention, and connecting that to the value chain. We have another program wherein we identified farmers along with the other institutions like Land O'Lakes, as well as Forest Genetics International and International Livestock Research Institute. The reason why we brought together is, if you look at the value chain of the dairy, we need to not only grow right feed, but also make it valuable in the sense how to make a silage so that it's available throughout the year. And the quality of that is good for the dairy, the milk production increases, and the income increases to the group of women farmers. So here is an example of I just wanted to bring out is we need to really look at multilateral partnerships to not only provide the inputs, provide the education, and bring in the availability of the finance through models. I can share a few examples of those. And more importantly, connecting to the value chain downstream. That is one of the most important things. And today you can have several models that we can see coming from the venture capitalists, and a lot of entrepreneurship supported by government policies are enabling those aggregation and as well as connecting to the value chain. And we can bring some of these examples available globally to the respective communities, depending upon the size of the farm and the structure that they are in. Michelle, thank you.
Okay, Thank you, Subara. I'd like to pick up on something that you said around technology. Tony Esmeralda, you are the tech person driving technology and agriculture. What are some of the technology innovations that Corteva has introduced into the sector?
Thank you, Michelle, for the opportunity.
I think you've frozen. Tony?
I think we lost Tony.
Yeah, I think we've lost Tony. Betty, I'd like to come to you on the multilateral partnerships. So, sorry, Tony, we'll come back to you after this.
Sorry, I'm back. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes. Do you want to go ahead?
Right, thank you. Yes, I certainly can. I think, obviously, as mentioned earlier, that the one way that we in Corteva help farmers is through technology and innovation. So it certainly starts with the technology that we use to develop the best seed, but also in terms of adding on biotechnology, if that's a choice of that the farmer wants to pursue in terms of that. And then obviously in terms of these days with technology, the measurement in terms of the soil, what needs to be adjusted in the soil, product placement, and digital measurements in terms of your yield, because if you measure it, you know what you need to do to improve. And certainly in South Africa, we started some of that processes. We still have a lot to do to be able to help farmers. We sit with our 2 seed with agronomy departments that on day-to-day basis advising farmers in terms of how they need to improve. Thank you.
Thank you. You seem to be having tech issues today, but we heard you clearly on your inputs. One follow-up question that I have is that we're living in a very water-scarce region. Do Corteva's tech and innovation initiatives consider the water scarcity within the region?
Yeah, Michelle, I can take it up and then hand it over to Betty. Well, definitely yes, from multi-dimensional perspective, I would call, right? Especially the biggest factor that we have here is the water tables going down. So our efforts is to breed some of the hybrids which could be very resilient and ability to perform under stressed conditions, be it water, be it the increased temperatures. The breeding programs has been going on for many years. In fact, we launched a product back in the US called Aquamax, which essentially under normal conditions, you get the full potential, and with the extreme conditions of less water and higher temperatures, you still performs much better than most of the other hybrids or varieties that you grow. Well, technologies are available. Is not necessarily, definitely biotech is one part of it, but there's a lot of new tools coming in with gene editing, and then the rich source of germplasm and how to use that to address some of the emerging stresses and the breeding knowledge and making it more relevant to the local conditions of bringing into the respective countries and testing them, and then enabling that piece is some of the areas that definitely Corteva has the pool of knowledge that we try to bring to local farms.
Okay, thanks, Subara. Betty Kiplagat, as government affairs leader, what is Corteva doing around multilateral partnerships? The SDG Goal 17 talks about the importance of partnerships in development. So could you talk a little bit about your initiatives around government and agriculture and the partnerships that Corteva has gone into to make sure that women have access to the facilities that they need to make their farms successful?
Thank you, Michelle. And today, when we are choosing to challenge, I think it's a good day to talk about women and the choice to challenge the norm. One of our biggest opportunities today is GIBS, I will actually start with yourselves. I think we have a beautiful partnership that has just been launched. And today we're going to inaugurate our first batch of the 35 students that are going in to be trained to be agripreneurs. And hopefully when we come back again on the International Day of Rural Women, we will have this cohort graduating and leading the rest of the women who within this sector. Why is this important? Partnerships are very important because you can't go it alone. We might have the technology, we could even have the knowledge base, but to be able to reach the millions of farmers that we want to reach, in the commitments that we've made as Corteva through our sustainability goals that we hope to achieve by 2030, we want to have reached about 50 million smallholder farmers. We are committed to engage more with women and youth. So all of us have committed in Corteva to be guided and led by our sustainability goals. I do hope that as we continue with our partnership, we will come and talk with the women at the Institute on what our commitment is to the sustainability goals. In Kenya, we've also partnered with the women where Julie works. We're calling it Corteva Women in Agriculture. The Corteva Women in Agriculture is a partnership that wants to ensure that these women are empowered, they understand the agronomic practices, they're linked to the value chains, the right value chains. Working with governments is very important because even if we do all this and the government is not part of it, then we don't have the right policy framework that we need to ensure that these women, their issues are highlighted and discussed. So of course, we know women are going through, even Julie articulated it, issues of finance. What can we do with governments to make sure that these women, the issues of finance are addressed, land issues. So our partnerships are geared to coming up with practical solutions. We are not the experts, but we need to bring in other experts that are able to just address the different challenges. So we have different partnerships. Let's say if it's farm equipment, we've got partnerships in that front. We work with AGRA in the rest of Africa. Africa is the Africa Green Revolution Forum for Africa. We work with USAID, USDA, we work with universities. Working with the universities is important. Why is that? Because we're bringing the ag sector, the ag information, the technology to the university space at an earlier pace, bringing the technologies, training the youth to understand the technologies that are up and coming. I could talk on about the many partners that we work with, but I know we don't have time today, and I hope we'll get an opportunity to come back and have this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. Just a reminder that Corteva is embarking on a series of roundtables where this is the first one, looking at the policy framework, but I'm sure all those other issues that you've raised, Betty, all the other partnerships would then come up in the other conversations as well. So we've had a first round of introductory remarks or opening questions for the participant, for the speakers. Can we go to the floor to find out if there's any question?
There is a question from Lungi Moloi. She says, or they say, please can you ask the minister to advise on how the blended finance works and when will it start?
That's within the South African context. Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lungi. Is the minister still with us? It seems is she still with us? Minister, there was a question directed to you about the blended finance tool that government has introduced and how to access the financial tool. Minister seems to have stepped off. Wandile, do you have any idea of some of these financial tools that are in the market? We're not specifically talking about finance, but I think it's about also sharing information about what's available that could enable women farmers to access finance.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. I think you're right. The minister probably stepped on the side for a moment. But on this question that is coming from the floor, all I could say is that from my engagements with government as well, that we understand that the blended finance will be launched soon. There the minister comes in. I think it's better she speaks for herself. Minister, let me yield so that you take on the mic.
No, thank you very much. I had not stepped out Wandile. I was actually listening. I just had closed my screen. And I must say that the conversation as it's happening is very interesting because I think there is an alignment from all of us. And Wandile, as he says, we will be launching before the end of March the blended finance scheme, which will really make sure that as government we put grant funding as well as get loan financing from participating institutions, development finance institutions, as well as the private sector finance. And we think this will actually enable entrepreneurs, particularly women entrepreneurs, to get affordable finance and in real time. And I noted that there was a concern raised about the challenges that the Land Bank is facing, but we all know that Minister of Finance in his budget has actually recapitalized the bank, so it is going to be on the good footing in my view. However, we need to make sure that in line with the 2002 legislation, the Land Bank actually focus on development and allow other sectors to actually engage in commercialization in terms of the access to finance and other financial services. Because for me, it's not just about finance alone, but it's also about financial services. The investment that has been made as well by the Minister of Finance on farmer support that has been announced in the budget for the current year, as well as the extension services, talks to the government's appreciation of the importance of agriculture in the recovery, as well as building back better post and during COVID, which I think is accepted. The president also announced the formation of the Agricultural Development Agency, which in my view will take into consideration the policy issues that were raised by the advisory panel on land and agriculture, which is really going to be an agency that assists us in the land acquisition, but also in the support of agricultural enterprises and bringing back those lands that have not yet been fully utilized by farmers owing to a range of difficulties that they've faced. Thank you very much. And lastly, the issue of partnership, I cannot agree more with all the speakers that they've raised. We are actually working with our commodity groups on a number of issues in terms of supporting farmers, but also we're looking at how we can work with the agribusiness sector, universities who are working with them, but also other enterprises who on their own can actually enter into partnership with government are actually welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. Do we take a second question from the floor?
The next question is for Mbali. Tembigile says, good morning. Many agricultural graduates want to enter into farming. It is, however, unclear where to, sorry, I lost my place, where to start. Let me just find my place. It is, however, unclear where to start within the South African context. So in terms of getting market exposure, how do I know who to sell to once I produce, and how can I get on the supplier base to be able to supply and export on a large scale?
Thanks, Mbali. Yeah. Mbali, is that clear? Yeah. Okay, thanks.
I think for individuals, whether it's agricultural graduates or just individuals in general who want to start farming, is that they need to do significant amount of research. So once you do that research, you'll eventually find out what commodity to start trading in, which markets to sell to, at what price, the quantities, etc. However, just to start in farming, you definitely need some capital, and I always advise individuals to start with what they have, the minimal resources. So for example, if an individual has about access to 10 hectares, what they should aspire to is starting on 1 or 2 hectares, like I did, manage that, and then gradually grow. For many people also that always approach me and asking for markets, I think it's also important to identify which market suits your business model. So typically some farmers generally want to start producing and want to enter into the mainstream markets like your established retailers, without identifying or knowing that established retailers is basically not their preferred market because their business is too small. There's certain elements that's required from formalized businesses, from suppliers once you start supplying to them, or if you are in the supply chain. So I think it's for individuals to really do their market research. If people want to start planting cabbages, they must identify in the immediate community who's buying cabbages, you know. There's our retailers who are franchise owned, who prefer to buy directly from farmers. And I think also looking beyond your typical markets. I was speaking to someone, I think a few days ago, and I said, you know, another avenue is funeral parlors, because funeral parlors are offering monthly packages to their members, where should there be a death in a family, a grocery pack is sent out. And when you look at the times of COVID and just generally at the rate in which people are passing on, there's definitely, as a cabbage farmer in a local community, there's definitely a market for you there to pursue, over and above feeding schemes, etc. So for individuals who really want to start small and gradually grow, start with the resources that you have. As much as we hear that there are organizations like Corteva and the government doing many things, I think it's, as an individual and as an entrepreneur, you really have to take the initiative on set by yourself to really start. And once you start growing, you'll eventually attract the right people.
Okay, thanks, Mbali. Julie, I would like to ask the same question of you, based in Kenya. What do young farmers need to think about when they want to start their business?
Okay, thank you so much. For farmers who want to start a business, first of all, you have to let them believe they can. You make them believe they can do it. You encourage them. And then you can advise them to seek business knowledge and identify the area of business that they want to start. They can also identify the source of capital, where they're going to get their capital from. You can advise on that. And then also the type of production, the type of the product they want to start a business in, and also the type of business. And also you can also teach them on value addition of their products, and also where to seek advice from. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Julie.
Michelle,
Subara, yes, please.
may I add a little bit more to the question? Is it okay?
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you. So one thing now what we have seen is this, I'm talking more from the opportunity point of view as a business for entrepreneurs, right? The situation that we went through in the 2020 with the pandemic and all has actually created significant opportunities for people to reinvent themselves in the way the food is made available to the households. I'm sure each country went through different new models, but that really accelerated and created lots of opportunities for people to deliver at home, right? Having said that thing, what is going to be the future? This is where entrepreneurs can really look at is, there is a huge amount of consumer research wherein people, the youth especially, are tending towards having food which is produced more sustainably in the sense of using right amount of water, respecting your soil. I think all those things are going to come in place. my point of view here is the current situation and the future is going to create more opportunities for youth and entrepreneurs to really look at it as to how you can get into the food industry. Of course, the backbone for that is agriculture, etc. Right? Michelle, that's one point I wanted to add.
Okay, thank you. Wandile, when you listen to this conversation, what are some of the policy suggestions that you could think of just off the cuff? I know you do that really well. So what are some of the policy suggestions, listening to these questions coming from the floor and the responses from Mbali and Julie?
Yeah, I think both Michelle, Mbali, and Julie here, they hit the nail on a head. I mean, these are issues they are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And I think Mbali on her side is even more diplomatic because she does great service for many young people in as far as what to do to enter into farming. She has great newsletters on her website and also great podcast that she does onto this. But I think the first step is on that point of saying a bit of research about where to start, what are you looking for, and then you develop from that end. But I do think that also from a public side, on the minister's side, I mean, I think at the regional offices that we do have across the country, there could be more active work in there. And I think that with the 10,000 extension officers that were announced by Minister Mboweni, there will be more active warm bodies on the ground, which would be available for many people that are looking for insight into the agricultural side. And on making sure that the graduates that are not willing to get into the services side of agriculture, but rather more on the practical side of farming. I think those partnerships, similar to one that is being done with you guys at GIBS, but also with other agricultural colleges and universities, those are always very powerful and beneficial. But I think at the core, the fundamental points that both Julia and Mbali were talking about knowing what you want, researching and speaking to some of the individuals and organizations that are in agriculture is always enlightening. I don't think that the direct bigger policy intervention here is largely necessary, but I think more of the programs and avenues under which people can follow when they are looking into entering this sector. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Wandile. Betty, I want to come back to something that you said in 2019, since we have the minister online, and I'm sorry to be putting you into this position, but in 2019, you mentioned that one of the most difficult parts of your role is not being able to convince policymakers that the policies they make have an impact on women's livelihoods. What needs to change in that relationship with government? I mean, Minister Didiza is really open to having these conversations, but I'm sure there are other contexts where policymakers are less open to having these conversations about women in agriculture.
Absolutely, Michelle, and you hit the nail on the head, actually. Making policy is an art, and it's also an interesting way. It is interesting that a lot of governments take a top-down approach. Policies that are very successful are from both up-down, top-down, so that you're engaging with all the sector players. If we are looking at the challenges that women are facing in agriculture today, when we are looking at the land issue, we know land has been historical. It's passed from our dads to their sons. That is not something that today minister will be able to address, but it is something that when we are looking at the new policies that we need to address, we need to call the affected parties, engage with them to understand those policies that have been there since time immemorial that need to change so that women can be empowered to have access to that land, to that input, is addressed. You call as many NGOs or any sector players and listen to their challenges so that as you're writing the policies might not address 100% the challenges that have been brought up, but at least will be sympathetic in the affirmations they give to the women and the challenges they're faced. So there are so many, the access to finance. My question is, how comes more men are able to access finance easily, yet women are not able to access finance? What policies do we need to get into so that we can start helping these women get that money, the same access as their fathers would, as their sons would? Why can't our daughters have the same access? Is that a policy issue? Do we need to go back to the grassroots? Even if we want to make policies with our chiefs, let's get back to the chief and ask the chief, why is it only the men can get because they have the title? What can a woman give to get access to that money? So my challenge is not that the government is not making policies. My challenge is the government is making policies that sometimes forget a very key important player, and that is the woman. And we need the woman to work with us so that we can change and grow agriculture and even other sectors. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Betty. Do we have any more questions online? But before we go there, Tony, there's a question that I have for you on technology, the role of technology. So you mentioned Corteva's technology initiatives about seeds and planting processes or any agricultural processes. Would these allow smallholder farmers, and we have heard that many of the smallholder farmers are women, would these technologies allow them to grow their business and step up? Because often we find women at the lower end of the value chain, whichever sector it is. Are your technologies looking at growing these businesses not only in size, but in terms of impact in the agricultural sector?
I would certainly say yes, it is. I think with the technologies that are changing these days, if you've got a smartphone, and I think Betty would tell you in Kenya, a lot of smallholder farmers do have access to smartphones. So the ability to be able to measure, to be able to get access to somebody that can come with a harvest, a combine or a tractor to plow your fields, all of those things have become more and more available with that technology. Now, certainly we will collaborate with parties in doing that. I would say in South Africa, we're not where we want to be in terms of about that, but the technologies are certainly available to do that for farmers. But I think, as I said earlier, it starts off in terms of your field. Do you know the technology goes into the germplasm, the molecule that we developed, so that once all the digital measurements that we make about the soil and which product is the right one for you, those are the basic things that I think we need to start off and then build with the other digital technologies on top of that for farmers. I think certainly if you think about the Kenya model as well, in terms of getting access to markets, how to sell your product online by just having access to a smartphone and a mobile phone. I think those are technologies that we can put in the hands of women farmers and help them to make their enterprises more profitable and successful as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Tony. I'm thinking about West African markets where the women look at the market price for their goods and then sell them at the real market price at the time because of smartphone integration with agriculture. Thank you. Do we have some more questions? Ngide?
Well, I do have a response. Betty, I tried to raise my hand on the platform. I can see you not seeing me. Sorry that I had to interject like this.
I see you, Minister.
I want to take the tagline that Betty used earlier that I choose to challenge, which is the hashtag theme for International Women's Day. And I think the point she's raising is important because how do we as women policymakers, and I will say women policymakers and women leaders, become change agents on the issues that impact on women and utilize our roles in being able to mobilize women into participation in the policy spaces. And it is possible. And one is willing. And I think in the South African space, we have tried to do that not only in policy, but also in the legislation. I do not deny that one can do more. And we will do it because I appreciate that for us to be able to respond appropriately to what women need, we need to understand what their lived experience is all about. It also requires women leaders to actually think outside the box. For instance, Whiphold, which is a women's holding company, they actually did where many people would never have thought, that you can have commercialization in traditional communities. They used their money, they used their clout, they worked with, firstly with women producers as well as wives of chiefs in Mbumba and Makoskazi in the Eastern Cape to actually have a conversation where chiefs could have more land set aside for women to plant, and they've now put actually a silo in that area of Tsentane, which has actually turned the landscape, but it has also forced the conversation within government to start to think differently about how to work with women in agricultural development. And I think it's correct what we are saying, that policy needs to meet each other halfway. Yes, there may be good ideas from the top, but there's actually very valuable experience from below, which can be put together. One of the things that Mbali said when she was responding to the young graduate who was saying, what do I need to do? She used her own experience of how she has actually entered the sector, which I think is very important. But I would also want to add that beyond us understanding what you want to do, doing some research, also appreciate that agriculture is a very long value chain. You don't all need to go into farming as a producer, wear your Wellington boots, which are good. You can have your telephone and your nice hat in the farm, great. But you can also enter the sector in the middle, in being an agro dealer, in being in the logistics chain, in being in the cold chain, or in being a trader, where you can actually market the goods and be a market agent for the farmers who want to reach the market. So for the young entrepreneurs who want to enter the sector, I would actually say there's a range at which you can enter. It's not only from the production, primary production, for instance. Thank you very much, Program Director, for having hijacked your platform a little.
Thank you, Minister. We have, I think you're the most important person in the room just by virtue of the fact that you can direct policy in the right direction. So we appreciate your inputs. Any questions from the floor?
There's a question around the African Free Trade Agreement and how that will be integrated to ensure that women entrepreneurs have a platform to learn and access resources with regards to export and import opportunities in agriculture.
Thank you. Is it directed at anyone?
Yeah, I believe at the Minister. And then we have another question or a comment rather around the blended finance, which will start at the end of March. They want to know, will this be announced on newspapers? And if so, which newspapers or sites, and what platforms should people pay attention to?
Okay, thank you. Minister, we're not letting you off the hook. There's one question for you.
I can see. I'll start with the last one. On the blended finance, yes, it will be announced in all public media, both electronic and print. We'll also try to use your local radio and community radio platforms so that we can reach as many people as it is possible. It would also be on our website as well as our social media platforms as a department, as well as the websites of the departments of agriculture in the provinces. Our participating partners, such as your financial institutions, your development finance institutions, such as IDC and Land Bank, will also have those in their platform so that it can reach as many people as is possible. With regards to the first question on Africa Continental Free Trade Area, as you know that, yes, it has been launched and it has started to work. One of the things we've been working on with the Minister of Finance is how do we actually publicize what are the things that people need to understand, to look for. For instance, there are certain issues that relate to trade within the region, which are very key and important. It's your ports of entry, whether land borders or whatever, which needs to actually be improved so that those who work in those platforms, they can actually understand what papers to look at as, to ensure that trade is flowing easily. But also, what do those who are trading, either in agriculture or any other goods, need to understand in terms of the rules of trade, even within this free trade area? For instance, there are issues that relate to the rules of origin, because as we talk and protect this trade area as a continent, we want to make sure that you do not want by accident to actually allow goods that 90 or even 100% don't come from our space to actually distort the African Trade Area agreements. So there are those issues which I think we will be making available to our entrepreneurs so that they can understand better what is it that they require in order to trade within the continent, as we've created this big marketplace for Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. Wandile, I want to hear your thoughts on the AFCFTA as well. Looking at the interconnections of agriculture across the regions. I mean, one of the issues that we have is value chain development across regions within Africa. So where does the agriculture sector find itself with the AFCFTA coming into promulgation now?
Thanks, Michelle. Let me answer that, Michelle, from a South Africa perspective, and to a certain extent also add to the views that Minister has shared, because I agree with all of that. I think as a start, Michelle, I mean, the whole aspect of trade is important for South Africa's agriculture. I mean, it's well known now that we export roughly half of what we produce in value terms. And I think that is also relevant to the conversation we are having today. Because if we are having a conversation about how do we increase the participation of women in agriculture, that involves women adding volume of goods to what South Africa is already producing in agriculture. And obviously that will have to find market elsewhere. And within the continent is very important for South Africa, because that $10 billion of agricultural products that South Africa exports annually, about 40% of it is already going to the continent, but is concentrated within the SADC region. Now we're beginning to have access in all of these broader markets. And I think that comes in nicely in line with the conversation of saying, let's increase the participation by women in the agricultural sector. As soon as that volume increases, there are all of these markets that we can pretty much access. I don't think that there needs, at least at this point, I might be wrong on this, but to be a deliberate attempt to say, maybe let's take as a matter of example, to say if we're trading maize, we would like a certain portion of that to be dedicated to women, but rather I think strengthening trade in general does already open up avenues under which all of those volumes that women or anybody can bring would be able to reach as many markets as possible. So overall, I think also as my closing point on this, even the other African countries, I think they need to look into South Africa as an important market. South Africa spends roughly $6 billion or so buying agricultural products from elsewhere, largely Middle East as well as South America. And I do think that other partners needs to look into South Africa, particularly the continental one, and see how they can benefit on what we're producing. Thanks.
Thanks, Wandile. There's a question in the room. Please switch on your mic and introduce yourself, and then you can direct your question.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning to the Minister and Corteva colleagues. I am a farmer from the Northwest. I have a question for the Minister. We are currently leasing a state farm. We are producing sunflower and maize, and we are 2 years on the farm. Quite recently, we have been having disgruntled villagers who happen to be called CPA members. These people come to the farms around, not only to our farm, and start intimidating farmers, especially black farmers. And we must just remember that the farms were occupied, obviously, previously by white farmers. And these people, the villagers, have not been having any issues with the white farmers before. But now the government is trying to assist women farmers, youth farmers, to work the land. But this matter has been reported to our local offices. So I saw an opportunity now that the minister is here to say, Minister, there is a problem out there. We are fighting black on black, whereby people are claiming that these are their ancestral land. We've gone to the deeds office. It is still to be proven, but the Department of Land Reform in my area in the Northwest has given us a letter stating that this farm belongs to the state, but the people come in their buggies, in numbers, and they claim that these are their lands. So for us, they've let us work because we had already planted on our farm, so they've left us. But as you know, the adjacent farmers, some of them are struggling, so they have not worked the land. So these people that are disgruntled, they see this as an opportunity. When they see that the farmers are struggling and they are not working, then they see it as an opportunity to come through and camp on these lands. It's not nice. People are struggling, yes, but they have been given the land by the state to lease for 30 years or so. So if maybe, the office from National can assist with my Northwest local office, we would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is the Minister still online? Minister, do you want to say briefly?
Indeed. I think these are the things we need to do it, because for me, while there might be a land need issue, but what we're also seeing, not just in the agricultural sector, but in the other sectors, where you have got a lot of thuggery that has crept in our spaces, where people will demand, for instance, from people who have been given contracts or even given land, a certain percentage, and they've been calling themselves amadela ngokubona, which is a matter that the security cluster is actually addressing, because it's disrupting development in our communities. You were seeing it in the townships where projects will be stopped because there are certain people who say they need 30% when they've not applied for the project or even expressed an interest to the one who has received the project to be included. We're seeing it in the farms where there's forced land invasions once the land has been given, particularly to young and women farmers. And it's a matter that we've raised with the Ministry of Police on how we can actually have an integrated rural safety strategy to deal with such matters. But indeed, I would appreciate if the lady can put her email on the chat group so that we can take it and follow the case that she has raised specifically.
Thank you, Minister, for offering that service. We were just about to ask you whether she could be in touch with your ministry on that. So thank you. I'm sure you've opened up an important conversation for many people. I was meant to mention earlier on that this event is also broadcasted live on foodformzansi.coza. No, mzansi.coza. That doesn't sound right. If you can put it in the chat, then people can share that. So, Subara, I'd like to come back to you about the trade across borders and whether Corteva's programs with each of the countries. I think you mentioned you are active in 17 countries across the continent. Or even Tony can come in here. What are some of the initiatives that you have to get regions to work with each other? In fact, Barbara, you can also come in here on the relationship side. Because we often talk about country development at this level, and we then struggle to move it up to regional level of discussion.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. I'll make very generic comments and then let Tony and Betty talk about it. Well, at the end of the day, the most important thing for us is to make farmers profitable. I think that's, unless and until we drive that with what intention, it's very difficult to sustain agriculture. Of all of us, especially with the smallholder farmers, the business is to create that value chain linkages so that they become profitable, right? As Wandile said, if South Africa is exporting so much outside and importing so much in, I think that kind of a trade is important from my perspective, right? Every country has, by natural resources, you are likely to produce something more profitably, right? Taking what you can do better and use that as a commodities to trade out and bring in what is produced elsewhere much more economically. I think those relationships would help to make it profitable for each of the countries and the farmers in the respective countries, in my opinion. So with that, let me hand it over to Betty to add anything from your perspective in the trade.
Thank you.
Thank you, Subara. One thing that we are excited about as Corteva is the Africa Continental Trade Area Agreement, because I think it will open borders. It will address some challenges within the value chains that have not been addressed previously. We've looked at the harmonized regulations for seed movement, for crop protection, through the COMESA, EAC, the East African Community, SADC, ECOWAS. There's so many of the RECs, the regional economic communities, that are coming up with different regulations that are important to their regions. But the Africa Continental Free Trade Area will also address other gaps that were there before, because some regulations, or what can I say, look internally, but whereas the Africa Free Trade Area Agreement is continent-wide, will also help us address some challenges that we've not seen in the harmonized regulations. We know within COMESA, we know within SADC, there's the harmonized regulations for seed movement. Are we implementing them fully? I don't think so. We've had challenges in countries, in regions like ECOWAS. You will find that ECOWAS, once the community adopts the regulations at that platform of ECOWAS, it becomes self-implementing. Within SADC, within EAC, what happens is it's not self-implementing. Our governments have to come back and pass that through Parliament, and sometimes there's that delay, and therefore we are not able to take advantage of all those regulations that would enable us trade more easily. There's also the other thing that a lot of governments are doing right now. They're looking internally, and we are calling that governments want to do more of their things in their country. But we in a seed industry sector, we think we cannot produce seed in each and every country. So we have seed production countries where we produce our seeds. Like for instance, we'll produce our seed for the East Africa region in Zambia and then move that across the border to Tanzania, to Kenya. And that's because we must look at the expertise of each of the countries within our communities. Zambia has got good practice and large farmers, big scale farmers who are into production. So, and then they have got the enabling regulations. Sometimes when we are looking at seed production, we look at all that, but we are not able to produce in each and every country. So this kind of, like the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, what it will do for us, it will help us go back to each of those governments and say, why don't we produce for Kenya for the East Africa community in Kenya, and then the other countries will also have an advantage of producing something else, so that we are not replicating and therefore utilizing expenses that would be better utilized to address other issues. They could even address the challenges that we're facing in COVID. So what are the strengths for each of the countries within the trade space? And then what can we do to support each other realize that strength?
Yeah, thank you, Betty. Just we're coming to the sort of the end of the normal interaction with the group. Did you want to add something?
Yes, there's a question for Mbali. I think she may have covered this one, but they're asking, how do we build successful relationships with our male counterparts in the sector?
I strongly believe in just introducing yourself. You know, business is about networking. You introduce yourself, you tell them what you do. I think platforms like this is also an opportunity to introduce yourself to male counterparts. You know, when I started farming, when I began my journey, and whilst I did my research, you constantly read headlines of it's a male-dominated industry and it's quite closed. And, you know, men or commercial established farmers aren't willing to support women farmers or young farmers at that. And how I've been able to establish relationships with male counterparts in the industry, and this is not only farmers, but your likes of Wandile in policymaking, some in the banking institutions. It's really about connecting and engaging and talking about topics that are pertinent to the sector that we're facing, you know. So if people don't present themselves out there and connect and engage, then you're closing yourself off to obviously those relationships and building those, starting those introductions, yeah.
Okay. So we have to have strategic relationships.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
you know, absolutely, because without that, I don't think you could go much further in the sector. I suppose from an entrepreneurship side, you know, they tend to say that entrepreneurship is a lonely journey. And so if you don't have the right input suppliers, accountants, financial advisors, you name it, individuals that you could contact on speed dial to support your business, then you won't really go that far. From a farming element, directly in primary production, if you don't have direct relationship with your input suppliers, your chemical and seed fertilizer companies, the tractor maintenance service suppliers, anybody that could assist you directly with your production, if you don't have that relationship with them, then you really won't go far. So it's very, very important to start building those relationships with individuals, input suppliers, or just businesses that are just supporting your farm business. So yeah, without those relationships, I don't think you could go far.
Yeah, and relationships with Corteva or companies like Corteva as well.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because the whole time when Corteva was speaking, I was like, I'd like to just come in there. Because you kept on asking Corteva, you know, what technology do they have, et cetera, and we must commend, and I'm not saying this because it's a Corteva, you know, event as well in partnership with Agbiz, but you commend organizations like Corteva coming up with research and development, coming up with products like biological pesticides that could help farmers like myself. And I'll tell you a real life story, Barbara. 2 weeks ago, a gentleman who is a sales agent for a seed and fertilizer distribution company who sells Corteva products, told me about a good product for Corteva's, where I positioned myself and I said, you know, my farm is all about production, but more so intensive.
Yeah.
So I need biological chemicals to handle pesticides like bollworm or whatever the case is. And he mentioned a Corteva product. And, you know, it's been 2 weeks and he hasn't brought it onto my farm. And I said, great, I want to try that. Send me an invoice, etc., you know, so that I could procure the product. And I think where we're missing this And I'm also coming from a standpoint to say that I didn't grow up in a farming environment. I'm a first-generation farmer, so the way I look at this industry is slightly totally different. And I understand and respect that agriculture in South Africa is already very much established with its own way of working. So when I look at this, and I thought, I'd like to access Corteva directly. Why do I have to go through a middleman? I understand that Corteva is a big organization. You don't have the footprint to directly approach farmers, but why do I have to go through a middleman? It's been 2 weeks. He hasn't sent that product through to me. How could I access that? Fortunately enough, Corteva, the Dalmas plant is a few kilometers from my farm, but I could literally possibly go there, or, maybe a question from a farmer's perspective is, where would I get that product directly from Corteva? How could I speak to a technical sales rep from Corteva and tell me this product is registered for me to be using in my pepper production? Because again, it's a link. You want corporates like Corteva to give you that information, and then you, as a farmer, you have you give peace of mind to a client to say, if they're procuring this product, we have full-on traceability. It does meet the food safety health standards, and it is a chemical that is registered for food safety. But if I have to go through that middleman who hasn't now come to my farm in 2 weeks, how do I access this fantastic technology that Corteva has? So the challenge maybe into Corteva is to say, it's great that you have all these technological products and enhancements, but how do you reach farmers directly and communicate with them directly without having to rely on the technical sales rep? Because quite honestly, they are doing a disservice in the amazing work that you're doing, and the products that you are investing in time and time again, it's not reaching directly to the farmers.
Okay. Well, thank you for that comment, Mbali, and I'm glad Tony is on the line. Tony looks after our South Africa business, and part of the beauty of this conversation really is that we are here to get those insights. And having said that, Tony, I don't know if you've got anything to add to Mbali's comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
No, I would just, Mbali, thank you for the feedback. It's certainly appreciated. That's why we want to have forums like this to get this type of feedback. Certainly, our go-to-market is different channels. We go through the distributors that are nationally, but also we have direct sales reps and technical people that can certainly help on that. So leave that for me. I'm going to personally follow up and get back to you on that.
Thank you very much. Agriculture is time-bound. Those borer beetles or whatever they are need to be treated. Yeah. Thanks, Tony. One last question from the floor, and then we'll have some concluding remarks.
Just a question from Anonymous. What advice can you give to someone that has no exposure or experience in the sector, but is passionate and willing to work and give it their all?
I think I'm going to open that one to Julie. What advice can you give someone who has absolutely no experience, but is passionate about agriculture? Julie, any advice?
Okay, thank you. What I would advise someone who has no knowledge, I think they could seek improved knowledge in business management and to seek more value addition from other avenues. And then they could also seek a partnership with like-minded private sector support programs. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Julie. I think what you're mentioning is quite important. We have so many young people who are coming into the sector not having had generations behind them working in the agricultural sector. But we should create an enabling environment where they have access to people like you, Julie, and like Mbali, who will, help them harness their passion in the right direction and grow the farming industry, the farming sector. And through companies like Corteva, who could also bring them onto agricultural training programs. They could become very good farmers in the future. So it's about identifying who your people are and what you can get from each of those relationships. Thank you. If I can go into the final section of the webinar, I would like to get some reflections from, let's say, Minister. Is Minister still online? And then Subara, Wandile, and Mbali. Just some closing remarks on what you have come away with from this session.
If I may start, thank you very much, and thanks to the other panelists for these reflections that I've made, as well as the participants. One of the things that, for me, have come out very clear is the importance of agriculture in the economy, but also in strengthening the livelihoods of our community. One thing that has come clear is the role of women and the role of youth. I mean, we've had lots of questions in the webinar, as well as comments from young people who want to enter this sector, which I think for me is the prospects of a good future that we are already starting to see. A new cohort of layers of agricultural leaders who are coming into the sector as producers, as well as agro entrepreneurs, which is much welcome. The other issue that has come out very clearly is how, from a policy point of view, we are going to be able to work in partnership to support the farmers, but at the same time, have conversation with those who are affected, women and youth, to be able to influence the policy direction that will support the growth of agriculture in our sector. And the role of finance, which is very critical, amongst others, land, water, and other inputs that are critical. But I think finance in this conversation came up as very key on how we actually ensure that finance is accessible to women. Thank you very much, Director. These were my last parting shots. Listen to.
Thank you. Just in case you have to leave us before the end, we really appreciate you spending the full 2 hours with us. That is a complete gift for the conversation. Thank you. Subara, your reflections on this morning.
Thank you, Michelle. Firstly, I'm very pleased and super excited to hear the enthusiasm from the people who participated in this to in agriculture. I'm making this statement with a lot of pride because I did my agriculture by education and have been in the industry for 30 years. And people say that why did you get stuck in this industry? Having said that, you might be also be hearing from here and there, the biggest concern across the world is how can we bring women and youth into agriculture? I think forums like this, the way it is organized and enthusiasm that you have seen here from the participants, I just props up our confidence to take this forward with much more enthusiasm and much more aggressively. On the tactical part, I think lots of things that we talked about, that goes back to the same fundamental things of access to inputs, access to finance, having education, closing the value chain, and maximizing the profitability. One thing I would say is the structurally these things need to be addressed, whether it is a big farm or a small farm, although they are different. I think more importantly on the small farms, there's one of the most complex issues that is being discussed worldwide, obviously. Having said that, there are many models that are emerging which are very successful. I think it's an opportunity for us to look at globally in different places, how these are being administered, improving productivity and bringing the smallholder farmers into the community to enhance that. Is one thing, a key takeaway from me, so that I can bring as much as we can for discussion in our next forums. With that, thank you very much for an excellent session today. Back to you, Michelle.
Thank you, Subara. Thanks for staying. I heard that you were going to leave, but I see we kept you for the full session. Thank you. Wandile, some closing remarks, some reflections.
Thanks, Michelle. I also want to just thank Corteva and Gibbs and all of the other colleagues for sharing their insights in here. And I think for me, my closing or reflection on this would firstly be that, us focusing on agriculture and discussing it not only from a South Africa perspective, but in a continental perspective is an important aspect. Michelle, you will agree, if you look at the number of economies in the continent, agriculture remains one of those important sectors for economic opportunities and also job opportunities. And centering women who have always been involved in agriculture in that discussion is an appropriate step to do. And I think the discussion about financing, it came from South Africa through Mbali, but I think it's the same need that is existing across the African continent. So to echo what the minister was also referring to. So I think that policymakers, private sector players across the continent, perhaps maybe can look at this blended finance instrument that South Africa is doing and see if some things like that could pretty much be done in all of the other African countries in the continent. And I think that while we are encouraging women to be involved as farmers, some of the points that the minister was referring to say opportunities across the value chain is one of the important things. You look at the jobs numbers in South Africa's farming sector, women are still about 31% of the people that are working there. We could push the boundary and ensuring that there's more women participation across the value chain. And even on a knowledge working space, the knowledge workers in agriculture, we could increase the number of women that are operating in that space. But overall, I think this was a fruitful session, and I'm thankful to be involved into this. Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks, Wandile. Mbali, some reflections?
Well, firstly, thank you to Corteva and Gibbs for starting off the roundtable discussions. And I think for my closing remark for women in this room and for those that are watching virtually is to be deliberate in our approach in supporting women. My daily environment, what I see is, it's a gentleman's club, it's a boys' club, and the men are doing it so well, Michelle, if I have a need for, I don't know, an irrigation service provider, and maybe I contact my seed rep, and he so happens to maybe be a man, he would refer a man to do that job. You know what I mean? If I need to outsource my logistics in the business, the people that I speak to will always refer their friends, and typically it would be a man in that environment. So I think as women, we need to learn at the way in which men are doing it so well. We need to be deliberate in supporting women. So for the women who sit in corporate position, in exco meetings, at board level, at senior management level, be deliberate in fighting for a female incumbent to take on a position that is open. For women farmers like myself who receive inquiries from maybe agents who want to buy additional products or additional vegetables and say, Mbali, please can you refer us to a cabbage farmer, we're looking for tons and tons of cabbages. I need to be deliberate and think of a female first. You know what I mean? And similarly to what Julia is doing, she's in processing. She's very deliberate on buying maize from females. So I think that's my closing remark. As females, as part of International Women's Day, let us be deliberate in bringing other women-owned businesses to the fore, bringing other women-owned professionals, farmers, whatever you name it, to the fore and giving them opportunities. And that's how we can create diversity in the sector and create an enabling environment for women in agriculture.
Okay, thanks, Mbali. Before I hand over to Tony, Barbara would like to say something.
Yes, we have so much engagement on Facebook and on the Zoom platform. And I've asked the Gibbs team to put their email address, their contact address on the chat. And the intention is really to take some of these questions that come through and forward to the relevant individuals on the platform today, because we would love to address everybody and give the information that's being asked for. I just thought I should add that. Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you. Just before Tony closes, just a few remarks from my side. I think Corteva, as I said in the beginning, Corteva needs to be commended for being one of the four, what does one say? I'm thinking in Afrikaans, sorry. One of the four leaders, not four as in front, one of the front leaders in driving women in agriculture. And we, as Gibbs, we really appreciate the relationship that we have with you, because I'm sure these discussions will also be taken into the classroom with the cohort who are starting the program. Just some of the reflections that I have, that there is an opportunity for women farmers to be more integrated into the policy discussions from government side, that Corteva could facilitate that discussion by having the women farmers in your networks engaged with those conversations that Betty drives from your side. The minister has, as the South African Minister of Agriculture and Land Reform, has expressed some interest in doing this. I think many other ministries across the region could do that as well. We have an opportunity with the African Continental Free Trade Agreement to talk about regional value chains, particularly within agriculture, and also to look at technologies across the regions that could possibly facilitate one region with lessons from another region. So the thought leadership within agriculture could be shared through companies like Corteva and programs that you're running with academic institutions. Finance is always going to be an issue that comes up, particularly finance for women. And one of the discussions that I would suggest you have is look at the finance value chain to see where the gaps are with the patient finance, with the venture capitalists, with angel funders, with philanthropists, government grants, the whole financial value chain, and see where women can have access points along that value chain through companies like you and other companies on the finance side. So it's been an amazing experience for me to be part of this discussion. And before I give to Tony to close, I wish you a productive International Women's Day wherever you are. And I hope these conversations continue as we go along. So, Tony, we'd like you to make
Right, thank you.
some comments on behalf of Corteva. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. I think I want to start by...
Tony, sorry, yeah. I just seen a message. Betty, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand. I can't see that far. You'd like to say something before Tony closes?
Yes, thank you. It was just one question that I think if we don't answer it here, we'll have missed an opportunity. A lot of people have asked, how do they become a member of the Gibbs training? It's just say that this year we opened it up, and I think we received over 800 applications, and we only had a spot for 35 women as a trial run. Let's see to take any more. This is our first year. Give us this opportunity to do a trial run, and then we will look for other partners. We will even come back to the minister to ask her to partner with us so that we can bring other women to be trained as agripreneurs. So that I thought was would be a missed opportunity if we didn't answer. Tony, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty.
Thank you, Betty. And I think that important point, especially with our relationship with Gibbs. But let me conclude quickly, guys. So I think, first of all, Honourable Minister, thank you for joining us today in your busy schedule. And I think we appreciate you for two things, the passion for ag, but also your passion for developing farmers as well as entrepreneurs in the industry. I want to say that as Corteva, we've got a way of working, and we've got a value that we call bring the outside in and to collaborate. So we understand that we can't go it alone. We need to work with partners like Gibbs and others to make a real difference. So certainly appreciating the relationship with Gibbs, and as Betty said, we'll see how we move on in terms of the resources, but there are many partners in private sector and ag and the government and NGOs that we can take hands with taking this program forward. I think this was a great start. We'll certainly take all of this into our boardrooms, into our own policy development, and make sure that as we move forward, we can make a difference in women farmers, but also I think, as the Minister said, entrepreneurs in agriculture. The supply chain is wide. There's a lot of space and opportunity within that as well. So I think, Michelle, I want to conclude with that and end off by a happy Women's Day for all of you. And then also the reason why we're virtual today is because of the virus. So please take care of yourselves and your families and be safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. I just want to mention something the minister reminded me of. We stand on the shoulders of the great women who have gone before us. And we're hoping that women like Mbali and Julia can build that ladder even further so that we have more shoulders to stand on. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for the online presence. Thank you for the people who made it into the room. And I wish everyone a happy day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.